Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to our 32nd episode of Cold War 2.0 with our dear friend Tarik Cyril Amar. Tarik, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm fine. How are you, Kevork?
I'm good. I'm good. I just wanted to, before we start this conversation, I saw some people say we started late today, 1 minute late. Is that
Ooh.
a German Pünktlichkeit, my friend? What is that? 1 minute is not late. Come on, bro. And it's starting late. Should start 1 minute ago. Yeah, 1 minute is not too late, my friend. And I'm not going to have a shave. If you're wondering, also that. It's been here for 10 years already, and I think my wife likes it, so I will keep it. Tarek, a lot happened since we spoke last week. It seems that there is a scandal hitting Ukraine, not that it never happened before, especially when it comes to the corruption. We have been like we knew before, even before the war, this hot war between Russia and Ukraine in 2022, that Ukraine was considered one of the most corrupted countries when it comes to the state institutions. We're speaking about them. You also lived in Ukraine, you studied there. How can we compare the situation before the war and after the war, before we go into these serious corruption allegations against Zelensky? Has the war increased the corruption levels there naturally, as it happens in any other country, or there was a special case of booming this institutionalized, let's say, corruption after the war?
So maybe I should say one thing first. I have lived in Ukraine for a total of 5 years, actually, on the ground, as it were, in the city of Lviv. If some people want to know the details, most of the time. And the first 2 years I was doing research for what turned into my first book, and before that my doctoral thesis. And the last or the next 3 years, there was a break in between. I returned, and then the next 3 years, I was actually the head of a sort of mix of an academic institute, research institute, and sort of civil society outreach outfit called the Center for Urban History of East Central Europe. They're still there. And it was quite a big place. You know, we had about 10 employees most of the time, and we were expanding. I'm just saying this because I've had plenty of opportunity to see certain aspects of Ukraine at work. I, of course, have never, and I mean this very seriously because it's important for me, I myself have never taken part in anything corrupt. But yes, you if you are working in such a position, you will at least witness things and sometimes have to deal with the indirect effects or the threat of them too. So yes, Ukraine has been for a long time, let's say since independence, right? Since it emerged again, or actually emerged really for the first time as a big independent state at the very beginning of the 1990s when the Soviet Union collapsed. Since then, Ukraine has been, and I say this without any irony or condescension, it's just true, a terribly corrupt state and a terribly corrupt country in many ways. And it's something that normal, ordinary Ukrainians, if I may put it like this, have always suffered from very much, right? This is corruption in Ukraine, and since I've lived there so long, and I've had friends there, and even a relationship, and so on, the whole thing, right? Corruption in Ukraine is pervasive. It really affects everyone. It is not, as you could think if you read the news that we are getting, sort of only an upper class sport, right? Where these oligarchs and these connected politicians shove around millions and even billions of not just the local currency, but the equivalent or just directly dollars and euros. That is a very important part of Ukrainian corruption. We're going to talk about this. But what people have to understand is it affects you everywhere.
Directly.
It's in academia. It's when you get your driving license. It's when you go to the doctor. It's
like
in
it
the
was in Syria.
It's then you know it, right? It's everywhere. And it poisons society, and it also creates a system in which it is extremely difficult for any individual or family to stay entirely outside of it. I could stay outside of it, although I've worked there, because I was a foreigner. I had this privilege of the other passport, right? Which allowed me I wasn't in the same way blackmailable. I wasn't in this, you couldn't pressure me into taking part. But if you are an ordinary Ukrainian living in Ukraine and the doctor of your child says, well, I can treat properly, but I need a little extra, what do you do? Or if your driving instructor says, and I'm talking about things I've witnessed, right, with acquaintances and friends and others. When your driving instructor says, well, yeah, you're driving all right, you can have your license, but you realize, right, there is a little extra fee here in play, right? And so on and so on. Corruption, this is something a lot of people in the West miss, is a bane, it's a scourge for ordinary Ukrainians. So now if we get back to the scandal that is happening now, that's very much an upper class thing, right? That's the upper 1% among themselves most of the time, but of course, damaging all the others. And what has happened is that two specialized agencies that exist in Ukraine, one is called NABU and the other is called SAPO, have uncovered a very serious major corruption scandal around a public utility called Energoatom. So it's essentially a utility that deals with nuclear energy, right, as it happens. I'll spare you the details, but the important thing is this has been going on for years, I would guess at least 2 years, if not longer. The investigation, you get different sort of accounts. The investigation itself, some people started in 23, some people say it started in 24, but under any account, the investigation into this group has been ongoing also for a long time. And now it has reached a stage where a number of people have been arrested, 5, I think. It was supposed to be 6, but one of them has been at least an extremely close, confidant, advisor, business partner, friend, all of these things of the President Volodymyr Zelensky himself. There's absolutely no doubt about this. This is not Russian propaganda. His name is Timur Mindic. Timur Mindic, yes. Timur Mindic managed to escape before he could be arrested. They tried to arrest him together with the others about 3 days ago. He got out. When you follow Ukrainian media, as I do, you will see that everybody assumes that he was tipped off, that he had a warning, and everybody assumes that the warning must have come from Zelensky himself, or at least from the so-called presidential office, which is the presidential administration. Mindic had 2 nicknames. One was simply Carson. I think it has to do with the fact that, let's not get into old Soviet culture, Carlson on the roof and so on. It's probably taken from there. It was very popular. The other nickname is much more important for our purposes, and it is old. It's not been applied just yet. Mindic's nickname has for a long time been the purse of the president. The purse of the president, because everybody knows that Mindic isn't just acting on his own account. This is common knowledge, and it's true. Now, here's the thing. These arrests were based on wiretaps. There is a specific apartment in Kiev on a street called Hrushevsky Street. I think I know it quite well, actually. Not the apartment, the street, for totally unrelated reasons. But there is a specific apartment in Kiev called Hrushevsky Street. And that apartment was wiretapped for, again, at least over a year by these specialized anti-corruption prosecuting agencies. They have 1,000 hours of recording. 1,000 hours of recording. Here's the interesting fact. They've released only a tiny bit. They haven't at all opened all of this, neither to the public, nor to the media, nor to anybody else. They're sitting on it. They've released a tiny bit. Now, a lot of Ukrainians assume, it can't be proven yet, let's be clear, but they assume, and I think they're absolutely right, that the tapes or the recordings, it's not literally tapes anymore, but the recordings that haven't been released yet. It is, to me, it's certain that they also feature the voice of the president himself, of Zelensky himself. It's not yet out. It's not yet been proven, but you have to understand that Mindich and Zelensky, I mean, they were like twins or something, right? Just to give you a little hint, Zelensky originally was what I would call a mediocre comedian and a TV producer. And as such, he was sort of a provincial businessman as well, in the million range or something. Not super rich, but very successful, especially by Ukrainian standards. Absolutely true. Now, how did he get where he is now? One of the key moments was when he linked up with a former oligarch called Igor Kolomoisky, one of the richest and sleaziest oligarchs of Ukraine. He's either no longer there or in prison. I've forgotten right now. So Kolomoisky is a key figure promoting Zelensky commercially with his TV business and politically. Like, without Kolomoisky, Zelensky would probably never have made the TV series Servant of the People, in which he played a president and sort of spread the idea that he would be a president, right? It started with that. Who put Kolomoisky in touch with Zelensky? We know who, right? Mindich, Timur Mindich. This is how close these two are. And whereas Kolomoisky has fallen from favor, right? He has fallen from favor. Mindich has stayed around until now as the closest of friends and business partners, right? Beyond that, there are at least two ministers have already resigned, Minister of Justice and the Energy Minister. A third minister or former minister of Defense, Rustem Umerov, happened to be traveling and is not coming back. Happened to be traveling and is not coming back.
Lucky bastard.
And the people in the anti-corruption agencies are saying he won't come back, that he's basically also fleeing already. That guy, former defense minister, currently is still the head of the National Security Council. Now, if you know how Zelensky built his power, how his system works, it has two key positions. The most important one is the administration, or as they now say, the office of the president, right? This is his engine house, right? This is from where he really rules. But the second most important one is this National Security Council. And when you go back into how Zelensky built his authoritarian system, and I keep telling people this because it's true, he started well before 22, well before the large-scale escalation of the war. Zelensky is an authoritarian at heart. He always wanted to do this. When you look at how he did it, the National Security Council was key, has been key in building the Zelensky variant of authoritarianism. Now, Rustem Umerov, the man who is not coming back to Ukraine, it seems, Rustem Umerov hasn't been the head or the secretary of this council for this whole period. That's not true, but he is now. So he's a key figure in real power politics in Ukraine. Another guy everybody knows is in there, but it's not proven yet, Andriy Yermak. Look him up. It doesn't get bigger than that either under Zelensky. Everybody is affected. Everybody is affected. And when you follow Ukrainian media, and these are not media that are usually critical of the system. This is Ukrainska Pravda, which is very pro-system. This is Radio Svoboda, which is the Ukrainian branch of Radio Free Europe. We know what these guys are like, right?
Yeah.
They are saying these things. They're coming out and talking about the fact that what Zelensky has done up until now in reaction to this enormous scandal is clearly insufficient. The question is really why the whole government hasn't resigned yet. And of course, the question behind this is because the president is not literally part of the government, he's above it, why Zelensky is still in office. There are all sorts of rumors, how he's threatened, what could happen to him, but maybe I should stop talking for a moment so you can
No, this is those details are very important, Tarik, and this leads me to the question, who stands behind these anti-corruption agencies in Ukraine? Because it seems to me that there is also struggle of power within
Yeah.
Ukraine and probably from outside Ukraine as well.
Yes.
Otherwise, this
Yes.
scandal could not have come to the surface, right?
Exactly. Because one thing you learn in Ukraine, and this is very much the way it's always been since I've known the place, and I've started going to Ukraine, living in Ukraine in 2000 with interruptions, right? I'm a veteran, battle scarred. So look, every Ukrainian government, it doesn't matter after what Maidan revolution it comes into power. Every Ukrainian government does the same thing. They always build a system around what we call a crony system, around a nepotistic system, around certain types of acquaintances, relatives even, and so on and so on. That's the real power structure. With the infamous Yanukovych, right? Viktor Yanukovych, who was toppled in 2014, right? With the infamous Viktor Yanukovych, it was called the family. Right now, they don't call it the family, but it's still there. They all do it. And now Zelensky has obviously also done it, and he's done it from the beginning and for years. Now, that means, I'm saying this, that there are no good guys in this game. There are never any good guys in this game. The next time somebody comes, it took me a long time to understand this. You know, in 2000, you see me here without hair, right?
Yeah.
Old and ragged. But in 2000, I was relatively young. I had ideals. So in 2000, I couldn't believe it yet, right? I was always looking for the good guy. Oh my God, maybe somebody is. No, there are no good guys. There are no good guys. So here, back to your question. The people who are now triggering this, these two anti-corruption agencies, NABU and SAPO, I'm not saying that every single investigator, detective working for them is also corrupt or politically ambitious. I'm not saying this. There might be some very heroic people in there, very courageous people. But structurally, it always ends up the same way. They also work for interests. And the interest is never the national interest. That never happens, except it could be the national interest of another country. That could be the case. And what people in Ukraine suspect is that these two agencies, SAPO and NABU, are well known to have strong connections to the Americans still, to the West in general, but to the Americans most of all. And I'm not saying this myself, all right? I think this is happening too, but I get this from me following mainstream Ukrainian media. People are speculating that this scandal breaking now may be a move that ultimately also has to do with Washington to take Zelensky apart. So, like, they've always known. Of course, they've always known how corrupt this country is. The question is, what do you do with it? Do you work with it? Do you give them even more? Do you make them work for you in a proxy war? Or do you at some point reach the point where you say, this guy isn't really good for us anymore. We want a new tool. Oh my God, he's corrupt.
Yes.
Now you bring it into the public.
Now they discovered it, finally,
Now
that there is corruption.
And Zelensky himself has discovered it. I mean, that's the game he's playing right now. Maybe I didn't make this clear enough. Zelensky, they haven't got evidence on him yet, or they haven't released it, which is my guess. So the game that Zelensky is now playing is he gives interviews to Bloomberg, not to Ukrainian outlets. I today was listening to a Ukrainian political scientist on Radio Svoboda, and he made that remark. He said, look, why isn't he talking to us? Why is he giving an interview to Bloomberg and not to Ukrainian media? What is going on here? Yeah, right? So Zelensky gives an interview to Bloomberg, I think 2 days ago, and he basically says, oh my God, you know, that famous scene in Casablanca when Rick discovers that there's gambling in his cafe. I'm shocked. There's corruption in my country. And you know what? With my best friend leading it.
I have not known about that.
Everybody calls my purse is corrupt. How did that happen? Right?
Who would have known?
And then he says, I want everything investigated. Right? Go after them. He's put sanctions on them. But it's very interesting. As somebody pointed out, usually the type of sanctions Zelensky has now put on Mindich and an accomplice, right? Usually they are put on people for 10 years. That's the standard. Weirdly enough, in their cases, it's just 3. It's just 3. And here's another very beautiful little detail. These 2 people, they're not the only ones involved, right? Mindic and the other guy's called Zuckerman. Mindic and Zuckerman are on the run. It's very likely they're in Israel because they have Israeli passports. If somebody's listening and thinks, oh my God, anti-Semitism, I can't help it. They have Israeli passports. It's not me. So, and it's not anti-Semitism. It's just a fact. So they have Israeli passports. And now, when he finally put the sanctions on these guys, right now, when he has to, Zelensky did this as if they were only Israeli citizens, which they're not. They have Ukrainian passports too. At least Mindic definitely has. So now people are saying, look, President, if your best friend, the person everybody knows is your purse, is now just an Israeli, like you pretend he's only a foreigner. How come he was so deeply involved with the most sensitive politics of our country?
Yes.
Nothing.
Well,
nothing in this scandal makes any sense at all.
No, it doesn't. And I'm not the expert on this. I'm just listening to your explanation now, and that's already I have a conflict in my head listening to this narrative. Sorry. By the way, guys, I just want to thank Kevork for gifting Syriana Analysis membership. And funny enough, our friend Johan received this gift, and our friend Sarah says, you don't get this type of amazing analysis from any other channel. Truth with laughter. I think I'm butchering. What is this? Interspersed. My so it's me. I'm just so tired today. By the way, now 500 people watching this live on only on YouTube, and I would really highly encourage you guys, just hit the like button, the thumbs up as you watch this. 1/3 of you do it, and the rest didn't. It would be great support for the channel, the content. It reaches to more people. And before we move to the second part of today's show, this is our special offer from Tarik. If you subscribe to his Substack, you will receive 20% off your new annual subscription, and this is valid for 3 days until the 17th of November. The link is scrolling on the screen, and the link is also in the description below. And you told me, Tarik, this link is different from the other ones. What's the catch on this link?
It's not really. It's just technically set differently. I didn't even pay attention, but this time you have to use the link to get the discount. That's all. You have to go through the link to get the discount. So don't miss the link.
So this is the link, guys. If you click on it, you will receive 20% off your annual subscriptions. The link is in the description below, and it's also scrolling here to you. Tarik, there is also, it seems, some saga here in Germany, and I also learned from you that the AfD was planned some of the politicians. The AfD is the alternative for Germany opposition on the right side, guys, and they are nowadays the biggest political party according to the polls. If there is an election now, they could have the highest votes, right? 25-26% around.
Correct.
And some of their politicians visited or were planning on visiting Sochi. And the head of the party, Alice Weidel, she criticized them and said, she said, I cannot understand what they are actually supposed to do there, to put it bluntly. And to my knowledge, to my sources, that there has been a lot of pressure inside the party, in the AfD, that some people want to open ties with Moscow and open ties with the United States. And Alice Weidel objected that and said that they shouldn't go to Moscow. What is going on in the party, and what does this mean for Germany?
Well, it's, I think it's one of those things where the context is the bigger story, right? It really is, because The trip itself, it's about 4, 5, 6 people maybe originally. Now it's already changed because fewer people are going. But originally, it's really a handful of people, one from the European Union Parliament, 2 from the Bundestag, the German Parliament. One is the head of the party in Saxony, which is an important position considering that they might win in Saxony next year, I think. Stuff like that. So, it's sort of mid-ranking to high-ranking as a group, right? Not any members, not as high as Alice Weidel or Tino Chrupalla himself, but substantial guys from the AfD. Now, before I say more about this, let me make one thing clear. As always, I myself, I'm very much on the left. So, but people need to understand that I have always been, and I'm still against any attempt to prohibit the AfD. I think that's a horrific idea. And not only for tactical reasons, like some other people on the left who say, well, it's not going to work. No, I think it may not work. And that's one problem, but it's also deeply unfair. It's completely wrong. It's highly undemocratic. And I'm absolutely against it. I'm also absolutely against the speech that the president of Germany has given a few days ago on the 9th of November, which was, I listened to the whole thing. It was a horrible speech in which he essentially, he didn't quite say it, but essentially he argued for prohibiting this party, which means prohibiting, as you rightly point out, the strongest current opposition party in the country. It also means essentially building another wall against East Germany, which was double ironic because the 9th of November is a special date, among other things. There are other things in there as well, but because the wall fell on that day in 1989, I'm sorry, 1989. And the AfD is not only strong in the former East Germany, but it is absolutely true, you can see it on maps and in statistics, that it mostly has the former East Germany. Now, you can like the politics of them or you can't. I don't like them, most of them. But that's not the point. The point is, if you build a firewall against that party, you're basically telling East German voters that their votes are not as important as other votes. Because with your votes, you can't influence coalition building, right? That can only be happen if you give your vote to another party. So the whole thing stinks. The firewall stinks. The prohibition idea stinks. And I don't care that I'm totally on the left. I can't stand it, right? So now the current story is this. The CDU, especially the CDU, the mainstream conservatives, right, have now escalated their fight against the AfD because they feel extremely threatened by them. They're right. Politically, they are very threatened by them. And they have now reached for especially unfair methods. They've always been unfair, but now they're really dialing it up to 11. And the idea is to smear the AfD with the brush of being in cahoots with Moscow, working for the Russians, maybe even spying. They have launched spying allegations without any evidence. It's a real, I would call it a Red Scare, except Russia isn't red anymore, right? So it's sort of McCarthyism, but not against any form of redness. It's McCarthyism simply against Russia as Russia, right? That's the campaign that is now happening against the AfD. And in this context, this relatively, it's important, but it's also not that sensational. This relatively harmless trip by this handful of AfD people to the Russian city of Sochi on the Black Sea has been turned into a scandal by the old established parties, the CDU in the lead, and by the mainstream media, which of course always follow that lead, right? Because Germany has such an incredibly free and diverse media sphere.
Yes.
Just kidding. Just kidding. So here's what happened next. The AfD leadership is splitting. I think they're making a rookie mistake. They will, of course, deny this and say, which is always what people say when they have an internal argument. You can see it from outside, right? The first thing they will tell you is, no, we don't have an argument. We're all friends here, right? No, they're not. Because you can actually see that the response is different. Alice Weidel, one of the leaders, of the two leaders, is
She's
essentially
co-chair. She's the co-chair of the party, right? The co-chair,
yes, she's co-chair, exactly. She takes the position, we have to scale down the Russia thing, right? So her response to the smear campaign is to make concessions. I think they're tactical. I don't think she actually identifies with the smear campaign. She's, that's not what she's doing. But she does say, and when you listen to an interview she's recently given to Compact in Germany, she does essentially hint at they're using this against us, this Russia smear, and we must make sure that we don't give them extra ammunition by our own behavior. So we have to be careful. And people who are not at the top of the party can't decide these things. And therefore, they should sort of, take a step back from this. And one person is already not going. A meeting that was planned with Dmitry Medvedev, former Russian president, now deputy head of their Security Council, has been cancelled. So there are certain concessions. And then the other co-chair, Tino Hrupala, right, which is less well known abroad, I think, but actually is a fairly important figure as well.
I think so too, yes.
Indeed. Tino Hrupala is actually more sticking to his guns. And essentially, and that came through in a talk show with the infamous Markus Lanz, essentially, Hrupala is just defending the AfD position and saying what I would say, frankly, that there's nothing wrong with going to Sochi, that the German government that is now in place, that might not all be Hrupala, but this is the position, I think, where he is with some others. The German government is neglecting the national interest of Germany, which consists in at least establishing contact with Russia and talking to them. Also, Sochi isn't just about Russia. It's actually a meeting about BRICS and the relationship between BRICS, and that means multipolarity and Europe. So it makes sense to participate in that as well. It is not supposed to be a meeting about Ukraine. So nobody can argue that they're somehow betraying our position on Ukraine or something. It's just not on the agenda. I think the meeting is perfectly fine and they should have gone. But what is happening in the leadership of the AfD is you can see how they're splitting. There's one side, Weidel, that is saying, no, come on, let's adapt. And there's another side that is saying, no, let's actually argue our case. If you compare this, right, one last point, if you compare this with other new right forces in Europe, right, it's a Meloni issue. It's a Meloni issue, right? You have a new right force that is rising, not yet in power in Germany, like in Italy. And the question is, how far do we go in adjusting to basically NATO priorities? And Weidel is more for suppleness. I don't want to insult her or anything. It's her position. I can see her logic, but I don't share it. Weidel is more for suppleness, and Hrupala is more for actually being sort of standing your ground politically.
Yes. I know one of the advisors of Hrupala personally. I don't know, his name is Shrupula or Hrupala. I know one of his advisors, very smart guy, and he writes on X about multipolarity and that.
Oh yeah, I'm reading his books. I know what you mean. Yeah, he's clever.
He's clever.
And he's an excellent writer. He's such a stylist in German, I have to say. Man, I'm not agreeing with a lot of stuff, but man, he can write.
he's often advocate of Germany joining a multipolar world with the US, with China, with Russia, and I think that's a reasonable position to take, regardless of the right and the left.
Certainly I agree with. Yes, absolutely.
But one of our commentators say they make this on purpose to make anti-Russian faction in the AfD stronger for the upcoming coalition, like back then with the NSDAP. I don't know what's that, but
come on, Kevork. The NSDAP is the full abbreviation for the Nazis.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but
I didn't know what is that.
Here's the point. Unlike a lot of other people who usually are against the AfD, I would actually not compare them to the Nazis. I think it's mostly a very unfair comparison. Or let me put it like this. If you want to compare certain parts of the AfD in some way ideologically to certain parts of Nazism, then you have to do the same for the CDU. You bet you have to. Because there's a 70% at least ideological position program overlap, actually, between the CDU and the AfD. It's actually been measured by political scientists, right? So this whole talk that you get from the mainstream center that we are totally different, never, that's nonsense. The reason why the conservatives are so afraid of the AfD is that the AfD is in many ways so similar, which is one reason why I don't like it. Because I think that the AfD is still a party of the rich, and maybe of the upper middle class, and that in social terms, it's as merciless as the people who are now in power. And for me, that's already a no-go, right?
Yeah.
But I will say again that I believe the comparison with Nazism are cheap. Steinmeier did this also, the president, in this terrible speech about which I've just talked. I'm a historian. I'm actually a historian, among other things, of 20th century Germany. Yes, I have studied Nazism. Yes, I discussed Nazism in my first book because the Nazis occupied the city I was writing about. I'm sort of a bit of an expert, actually, right? Reasonably well trained at Oxford, LSE in Princeton. And I'm going to have to say to the president of Germany, his sort of lopsided, potted history is just nonsense. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is just, it actually repels me. It disgusts me a little bit to see somebody cheapening history in this way and turning it into this cheap and I think ultimately very misleading, perhaps even dishonest polemical tool. So I don't like these Nazi comparisons at all.
But in Germany, Tarik, it is so normalized to accuse people of Nazism. Like in political discussion, I'm not like it is this exit, like if you disagree, if you have a probably always the Nazism is like they're throwing accusations at you, and it's in my opinion, it's a Zionist tactic to silence any opposition.
Kevork, I have been very vocal in writing and on formats like this about what I think about the Gaza genocide, which Israel has been committing now for years and is still committing together with, among others, Germany, accomplices, right? Yes. Been very vocal about this. I'm very clear in my mind about this. And I'm sure that some people would love to smear me with some sort of Nazi comparison simply because I criticize Israel. I criticize Israel as an apartheid genocidal state, which it literally is, right? So I know what you're talking about, the facility with which people in parts of German political culture reach for this very unfair comparison. But I would say one thing about the comment that we started this with. I agree in one respect with the the person who wrote the comment, which is there may really be an attempt to deliberately from outside incentivize an anti-Russian faction inside the AfD. That might actually be happening. When you see how Tino Chrupalla and Alice de Weidel at the very top of the party are no longer really saying the same things about this case, you can also see how somebody in the CDU would be extremely happy about this. Yes. Because if the AfD develops a faction problem of that kind, that would, of course, weaken it.
Indeed. One person says, living in Germany and don't know NSDAP. Excuse my ignorance, dear friend. I didn't know what the hell is this abbreviation. I'm not an expert on World War II or Nazism. I really didn't know what abbreviation is that. NSDAP. It looked like a basketball league or something. I don't know what was that. Sorry to say, like an NBA team.
I won't even spell it out. Obviously, I know exactly what it means, but I won't spell it out because I won't. But I think it was Churchill was one of the first. I'm sure he wasn't the only one. So there I might be a little bit off. But he was one of the people who refused to use this official name, either as an abbreviation or its full form, and who always called them the Nazis, which of course the Nazis really deserved, right? I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to go for like NSDAP as if they're this serious force and we all have to respect the way they called themselves. No, they were the Nazis, bastards.
True. Tarik, what is happening in regards to the Epstein's files? We've seen some leaks, emails of Epstein. What should we know about this? Like when it comes to the content and the relationship between Epstein and Trump?
Yeah, look, I mean, there was a very interesting op-ed today in the Washington Post, right? And the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, is of course not like an unbiased source or anything. That's not why I'm referring to it. But it was interesting because what the writer was saying was that, in her opinion, there is only one issue on which Trump has a serious problem with the MAGA base. I think she's wrong. I think it's not only one, but I think she's right insofar I agree with her. The Epstein issue is an issue where Trump and the MAGA base have a serious rift. And that's a big problem for Trump. So what seems to be happening with the new trickle of information, right, is that one thing it shows is that Trump's narrative, his claim that he broke with Jeffrey Epstein, that's true, he did break with him. I think nobody doubts that at some point. And that he never really knew what Epstein was up to, that is wrong, that is untrue. And I think we've all already known that Trump is fibbing here mightily, right? Because his initial story even didn't make sense. He broke with him because he knew what was going on to an extent, and now we know a little more about this. And Epstein, in one of the things that have been leaked now, writes to another guy that Trump is a dog that didn't bark. I think he wrote that in 2011 when he was in serious legal trouble, I think for the first time, far too late in his life. So what part of the emails does that we see now is it reminds you that Trump hasn't as far away from Epstein as he has claimed. That's just not true. Now, it does get tricky because although I think Trump is a fascist, I think it's just the technically correct definition for him, not a Nazi, a fascist. Slight difference here sometimes. I think Trump is a modern libertarian American version of fascism. But I have to say one thing, maybe not in his defense, but to be fair even to him, what the new emails seem to indicate is that he had solid knowledge of what Epstein was up to. That's bad enough. Even then, Trump as well had a duty, for instance, to inform the police. Let's not forget about simple stuff like that. If you know about a pedophile running a ring where young girls are abused systematically in large numbers, it's not good enough to just say, I've got nothing to do with it. You should do something against that, right? So that's not harmless. But what these communications do not seem to show is that Trump was necessarily participating in the abuse. There is one part of it which is very suspect, where Epstein, so it's Epstein himself writing, let's be very clear. Epstein himself writes to somebody else that Trump was together for several hours with one of these young girls, right? And may have been grief for herself. So tricky, right? I'm not excluding that Trump as well, like the former Prince Andrew, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, he lost his princehood, right? It's not excluded that Trump himself participated in the very worst of it, actually abusing the young women, right? And not only technically, but legally and in substance, underage women, girls in that sense, right? It's not excluded. Don't get me wrong. I'm not naive. But it seems to me that the current evidence doesn't yet prove that. But it's bad enough. It proves he knew much more than he wanted to admit. And it, of course, casts a new light on the fact that Trump, for years, he really did, promised his voters, if you vote for me, I reveal everything. Big release, all of it, out in the public. You can look at it. And then he completely reversed course. Only a few months ago, his, Attorney General, Leavitt is the speaker, I'm sorry, Pam Bondi, said to the American media and the world, I have the Epstein client list on my desk. And then a few weeks later, she came out and said, there is no client list. No, this is how brutal it was. There is no client list. Yes, there are documents that we call the Epstein files, but there isn't a client list. Suddenly, there wasn't a client list. So whether there's one list or not, one thing we can safely assume is that the files themselves, all the documents, some are relating to Epstein, the abuser, the pedophile, the criminal, I think the secret agent, that all of these files, of course, when you release them all, you would find a lot more names, right? Not just Andrew Windsor, Mountbatten Windsor, not just Bill Gates, who has been implicated, not just Larry Summers, former Harvard president, or still, I don't know even, who, no, not yet, no longer, who has been implicated. You would find many more names. And then, of course, people begin to ask, why is Trump in the way? We always thought that Trump is sort of his own person, that he is not protecting the rest of the elite, that the rest of the elite is a swamp for him, that he would throw them to us, as it were. But if he's not doing that, it can only mean two things. Either he has something to lose himself, there's direct evidence against him, so he's just one of the abusers. Or secondly, he is, after all, one of the elite. And after all, his, as it were, obligation to them overrides the obligation to us, the voters and MAGA base. This has not been dissolved or resolved yet.
Yes, I'm not trying to give him any justifications, but what if, I'm saying for an argument's sake, that there are names in the client list that could incriminate people who are in positions of power in sensitive places in the United States right now, which could mean a crumbling of the system itself in the US. So maybe it's protecting the system from crumbling from within.
You see, I personally, I think that's an extremely interesting idea, but I personally wouldn't quite believe it, and I'll tell you why. Because I just don't see Trump as somebody who is that altruistic. I think if Trump could bring down the system, but save his own behind, he wouldn't hesitate a second, right?
Indeed.
But of course, maybe if you twist it a little, that would be my version. There could be people on this list or in these files somehow that have so much power that they're still dangerous even to Trump, even if he himself is not directly implicated, and so he's protecting them out of some sort of fear. Who knows? We, of course, have to also accept another thing that I really would like to mention here, which is we have no proof. I know this. But Jeffrey Epstein's career, if you follow it in a little detail, how he rose from nothing special, right? He wasn't born to this.
Yes.
He was apparently smart, unfortunately, a very evil but relatively smart man, right? So he could, unfortunately, do more evil with his brains. But otherwise, there isn't something very special about him, where he came from. And then you follow his career, and again, he makes these completely impossible career leaps. He reaches positions nobody is given at his age or with his qualifications. He flops out of one thing immediately into something new, even better and bigger, although he failed in the thing before. You can go through this. It's a career that reeks of there's somebody in the background pushing and protecting and promoting him. And
Tarik, he was just learning from his mistakes. You don't know about these things. He was learning from his mistakes and from his failures.
That's right. He was learning from his mistakes. I know, right? No, I think he was working for an intelligence service. Working for an intelligence service, if not two.
Yeah, I want to show what Whitney Webb says about this, because Whitney is the expert on this case, and this is what she says. My feeling is that now it is safe to release the info that Epstein was really a sex trafficker as a side gig and was mainly an intelligence asset of Israel and the US. A big-time financial criminal on behalf of transnational capital. I would argue transnational organized crime disguised as transnational capital. And an arms trader, because the people he was helping have stolen so much of America's wealth and have taken control over so much of the government. That is why even admitting the true breadth of this scandal and operation doesn't even seem to move the needle. Criminals are in charge and they run both parties. They have created the infrastructure for neo-feudalism enforced by technology and are herding us into the corral. Opt out of AI, digital ID, and the surveillance state that Epstein's associates built now because we still can. So he was a lot, and I totally agree with you. I don't think he was doing this as a side job. This was definitely a mission that he was pursuing. And interestingly, Tom Barak, who is the U.S. Special Envoy now to the region, who told the Lebanese people to act civilized and not be animalistic, this is what he said. Jeffrey Epstein to U.S. Special Envoy to Syria, Tom Barak, send photos of you and child, make me smile. There are weird things happening in these emails, but one of the weirdest things, I mean, for some people, they don't say this is weird at all.
Yes, those are weird people.
But there are people, but there are people like Chomsky, you know. What do you make out of Chomsky?
Nothing up until now. I find it very, very strange. I mean, he can't be asked now. He's dead. I have to say,
Chomsky is dead.
Chomsky? I thought so. Am I wrong? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not. I hope I'm wrong. But I hope
guys, let us know in the comments if he's dead or not, because I heard the news of he was going to die, but then I thought that he recovered. Not yet.
But anyhow, the more important point is Chomsky was. Maybe he was asked about this more often than once, but I know about one occasion when Chomsky was asked and challenged about this. I really can't remember who it was, but there was a journalist or a YouTuber. Somebody actually asked Chomsky directly, what about these contacts that you have had with Jeffrey Epstein? And his response, Chomsky's response, I found extremely disappointing, because it was simply, that's no business of yours. Quite verbatim. I remember it even now. That's no business of yours. And okay, maybe there was really absolutely nothing untoward. Maybe he was in some sort of contact with this man that didn't have anything to do with Epstein's horrific crimes, in which case I can almost understand why Chomsky would react with so much pride, right? He would be like, you're implying something terrible. I won't even talk to you. But I don't think it's good enough for a man with his public resonance. I think he should have said something more substantial. Beyond that, I have no idea. I really have no idea.
I totally agree. Johan, my friend, I would really love to make you moderator. I have no problem at all. Today our moderator is absent. I will ask him, like, if he on his absent, if it's like okay with him, because he's usually present. And I would like to ask him as well. And if he's okay, I would love to, of course. And I will send him an email now after this show, and I will ask him. About Chomsky, this is besides the Epstein file and also Norman Finkelstein. I was very disappointed of both of them, because they have pushed so much this liberal view of the war in Syria, like no, we need democracy, we need to allow the people to change the regime. And then when the US wanted to withdraw from Syria in 2017, Chomsky pushed against Trump, saying that US should stay in Syria. I was like, what is happening? You know, like I'm reaching to a point where I no longer have someone I can call an idol, someone that is righteous about things, in geopolitics.
As Christians, we are not supposed to have idols. So, all the better for you. No? But you look, I mean, Finkelstein, I have immense admiration for him. And let's be fair, right? I mean, what he has done in terms of arguing the case against Israeli crimes and also sacrificing a lot, and just immense work this guy is doing, right? Let me say that first. But I think when it comes to Finkelstein and Chomsky, I have sometimes been intrigued by the way that Finkelstein talks about Chomsky, and with an incredible degree of reverence, which made me almost feel a little uneasy. Like, Finkelstein himself has done so much, and he's almost still making himself into this little pupil when he talks about Chomsky. And I think that's, I think that's misguided in the end. It's a psychological factor. But let me once again stress, I think Finkelstein will in many ways be remembered as a hero. And rightly so, But you're right about Syria. You're right, and that's not a small thing. I
Yeah.
don't know why Syria has. I know people like that too, and I don't want to sort of be nasty about them now in their absence. But I have been intrigued by people who have swallowed the very naive Western renditions of what happened in Syria, although in many other areas they are very aware and they're very critical. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, that's what surprised me, because when you have such a track record of understanding US imperialism and its dirty wars and tactics, regime change operations,
Yeah.
you could be wrong, let's say, in the first 2-3 years, and then things become more clear, like you understand that what is going on is a regime change operation and not a revolution.
Yes,
And
it shouldn't
when
take
you
you.
don't,
At some
yeah,
point, you should. Yeah, I
you shouldn't.
totally agree. I totally
When
agree.
you don't backtrack, I think you insist on the wrong. I
Yeah.
start raising questions like, okay, now the regime change happened in Syria. Dear Dr. Finkstein, and he knows, I'm talking about now 16, 17 years ago. We used to exchange emails. I loved him when I was in Syria. I used to read his books. And so now the regime change happened. Like, don't you see, like, Syria has become a Zionist
Kevork,
client
who doesn't
state?
see it now? I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, Jolani, the regional head of Al Qaeda,
Yeah.
is now besties with the president of the United States.
Mhm.
It's like, there is a Russian author. It's one of the famous modern ones, and I think he's still alive. And I should really remember his name. But famously, in one of his novels or short stories, I can't quite remember. Years ago, he described a dystopian scene in which Osama bin Laden would travel to the United States and be greeted as an ally, and how everybody would be hypocritical and like, yeah, it's all over and now we are friends and blah,
Yeah.
blah, because of some sort of geopolitical scenario that this author thought up, right? And you
Yes.
can read this and say, no, that can't happen. That's too cynical. But that's exactly what just happened.
Yes.
Except it's not bin Laden himself. It's another really big Al Qaeda guy. And it should be totally untouchable, obviously.
Yes.
No, I
Yeah.
mean, people who don't see now what has really happened in Syria, I mean, that must be malevolent. That must be pride. That must be vanity. Just not
totally
being
agree.
ready to face your mistakes or something.
I totally agree. Johan, my friend, I made you also a moderator. I learned from the comments that I can make 2 moderators, so I also added you as a moderator. So next time when you join, you could do it jointly also with our friend with Access, and as our also moderator Johan now says, like the stream, guys. Before we end up today's conversation, Tarik, thank you so much really for this amazing conversation with you, for your insight. We really appreciate your presence every week on our show. We learn from you. I can't show you all the comments here, unfortunately, but people are very appreciative of your intelligence and also your
I
insight.
thank them for being here. No,
So thank
really.
you so much, guys, really, also for all the comments. Today we reached almost 700 views live as we were watching only on YouTube. While you're watching, guys, if you want to support this work, just hit the like button, subscribe to Syriana Analysis, and if you like to do more, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis, or you can simply scan this QR code. So thank you so much. Thank you so much also, Tarik. Peace be upon you guys, and I will see you on Monday. Salam.